going to be all about what we're doing today. Today, we're talking. We're just going to have a little chat about our topic of the day, which is thinking, our minds. What's going on up here? But before we really dive into that, um, I hold on. Let me get back to where I need to be on here. Sorry, I'm trying to get better at this. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to preface that this video, all my content is for entertainment purposes. It is not meant to be educational. It is not from a professional. It is purely for my own enjoyment and maybe for relatability. Do not take it as professional advice or advice at all. If you are having any problems, any difficulties with life, please reach out to a professional for help. Reaching out is the best and first step to any of your personal problems. With that being said, today's topic is thinking. I wanted to start out by prefacing that we all think differently. From what I've learned, uh, some people think in dialogue. Raise your hand if you think in dialogue. Some people think in pictures. Some people think in patterns. We don't know exactly why, or at least I don't. Sorry, I should try to speak for myself here. I don't know why, but I think it's absolutely fascinating. People think in completely different ways and about completely different things. I think a lot in like scenarios, scenes in my head. Things play out almost like a skit or a play in my own head. Mostly conversations, um, but mostly back and forth, trying to debate or argue until I get to a conclusive decision in my own head about whatever topic it is. And that's ongoing, nonstop throughout my whole day. I'm able to visualize pictures, scenes in my head, things that I've seen in the past. Sometimes I'll think of like a word or something and I'll see like the writing, or thinking of a scenario, I could picture something I've already seen. Uh, but I've had many conversations with people who think in completely different ways. Some people, maybe it's just unawareness, but I've spoken to some people who are able to just like shut their mind off. They're trying to do their daily, like morning routines or something. They wake up and they think, all right, time to get to it, and they just shut their mind off. Not really thinking, not really imagining anything, nothing going on in their head. They just shut it off and they get to it. As somebody who has not always been the biggest fan of having to think all the time, nonstop. There is no like on off switch. It would be nice to have, like some peace and quiet. But I think that thinking is, it's important. Thinking is important. I think that in order to function as a human being, in order to have the required functions to make it through your day to day, you have to be able to make decisions. And um, while it might not be necessary to have to make a decision to do everything, I myself, it's a choice to have to brush your teeth, to put your shoes on, choose what clothes you're going to wear. Everything to me is a decision. And uh, that ties in to ADHD and mental, like brain functionality. I don't know the exact science behind understand ADHD. It's really just all come down to trying to understand myself, trying to stay on topic here. But thinking with ADHD is really what I wanted to speak on today. I was born and raised knowing I had ADHD, medicated at that. So my childhood having ADHD was unique compared to most who have ADHD. ADHD is one of the most underdiagnosed um, diagnoses, mental disorders that people have very commonly. I think it's a 1 in 5, 1 in 10 people have ADD or some form of ADHD. Uh, Kind of hard to know if you have it, unless you have ADHD. It's incredibly hard to try to understand um, the mindset. And so my goal here today is to try to, like kind of talk on that. Try to explain what it's like to think as somebody who has ADHD. And I've tried to do this in the past with myself, with other people, and it is incredibly challenging. It takes me hours to try to get a point through when trying to explain thoroughly something that is going on in my head, the way I think. Um, there's a lot of examples of people who have ADHD or any kind of mental disability, or I don't want to really call it a disability, but some kind of neurodivergency. Um, and it is profound. I mean, like the examples and metaphors that you can find are all incredible, but also just as incredibly difficult to understand, um, unless you have them and can relate. Uh, for me, one of the best examples, and it's kind of like um, basic, because again, it's hard to understand, and I'm gonna try my best here to explain what that's like for me. And by the end of this, I'm really hoping that I can hear some of your guys' views and some of your guys' um, experiences with thinking. Maybe this will even reach somebody who has ADHD. That would be crazy. Um, but I just want to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Maybe some examples that you've had, or if you've ever come around to it, try to explain what it's like for you to think, what processes you go through. Um, for me, thinking is a constant argument between two people, but both people have like posses trying to defend each of their arguments, and every single person on each side, like two main people with their like coordinators or whatever, people trying to help decide what they say next, all have their own dialogues that I go through, maybe simultaneously, sometimes one by one. I'll try to pick apart what everybody's thinking about, I guess. I mean, they're not all individual people, I don't really, it's not like I have different personalities. It's just me talking to myself in many different ways from different perspectives, um, all to reach the same goal of trying to understand what's in front of me or what it is that I'm thinking about. Sometimes a random thought will pop in my head, and that is what will spark, what comes on next in that conversation. But truly, that conversation never ends. Um, it is just a constantly evolving conversation. There'll be, like, I guess a better way to explain it would be that both of these people arguing are also looking through my eyes, and they are seeing and observing what's going on around me. They're also observing my thoughts, random things that I decide to think about, or not decide, but things that I just come into my mind. And they talk about it. They just have a discussion about that, and until they can come to the conclusion, or until they're distracted by the next thing, So that makes it really hard to stay on topic, which is kind of branching, but also why I'm deciding to start doing this, because it's incredibly hard for me to stay on topic when speaking out loud, when reading, when listening, when doing anything, as long as whatever comes next is more entertaining or is able to grab my attention more than whatever it was that was already on my mind. Then it's not like it's tossed to the side and forgotten, but it's kind of put to the side for further notice, like kind of put on a rain check. Um, but there are so many things that have been put, like that have been rain checked that it kind of just ends up getting lost. Uh, that's another thing that I'm hoping to go through when, like, another thing I'm hoping to work on through this journey, or through this streaming slash video making, is that uh, I want to touch on topics that have been rain checked. I want to touch on everything that I've gone through. I'll probably come back to topics multiple times. This is not the only time I'm going to talk about what it's like to think. I think in purely dialogue, I can also picture, like if need be, sometimes I can picture scenarios in my head. Um, which is, like, it is cool, it is unique, but I can't come up with anything new. Like, I can picture a combination of a bunch of things that I've seen, but I can't picture a completely new scene with all new things that I've never seen before, if that makes sense. I've tried really hard, but all I see is previous experiences, which I don't mind. Sometimes that sparks really, really odd conversations in my head, really odd thinking. Um, looks like somebody just donated Coco. On to the next thing. I wanted to talk about, I also wanted to talk about what it was like growing up, um, because it's one thing to think in a certain way, like in a literal sense, objectively how somebody thinks. It's very fascinating to me, and I would really love to hear your guys's examples, views, um, experiences on what it is like to think. Just your process in terms of thinking about things, because that is, I mean, like, it's hard, but it is so enjoyable to try to process that in your own mind. But that is a person in general, that is something personal. What is not personal is your upbringing as a person. This is going to be kind of a sensitive topic, so in case you don't really want to think about your upbringing, your childhood, my upbringing, my childhood, then you're okay. You can click off, or in the video I'll give you a timestamp of when we move on to the next topic. But uh, in my childhood, I really not a hard topic to talk about. I was incredibly fortunate. I was born into a military family, so it was a lot of moving, and I'll get into that. But um, I was kind of pampered. I don't want to paint anything in a bad light, because, to be honest, I lived a fantastic childhood. Very lucky. Grew up in Pensacola, Florida. Moved to Key West, the Keys. Very, uh, very beautiful place. Would love to visit them again. Tourist attraction, southernmost point of America. And it was awesome. I rode around on scooters with friends. Everybody kind of knew each other that went to school there. Um, and everybody was military families, so everybody was relatively well behaved, and um, easy to get along with, if that makes sense. There was obviously, some rough rocks, but uh, it was a good childhood. I cannot complain. However, that does lead me to talking about responsibility, and um, what forms somebody's meaning in the purpose of their life, or their drive to succeed in whatever their purpose is. And to me, when a parent goes and hands their kid something and says, "This is yours because I want it to be yours," um, or this is yours because you wanted it to be yours, then it's kind of hard for me to explain it when, it's kind of the first time I've tried explaining it. So bear with me on the logicality and how hard it is to follow me with this. But it's it forms this sort of idea that things are supposed to be given to you. If you're in your formative years, there's no critical thinking going on. Um, there is no decision making, and there is no opinions to be had. You are learning how to make those opinions and what kind of opinions you should be making. And when your guardians, whoever you look up to, is telling you these things or even showing you these things, I think you deserve this, so here it is. Then you learn this is what you deserve. This is what people want for me. And uh, I get what those people want or what I want. If you ask for something as a child, you say, I want this, and your parents give that to you, then yes, happy child, but in their brain, what develops is, if I want this and my parents buy it for me, and obviously what the parents say is matters incredibly, but if the parents say, I'm gonna buy this to you, okay, like you deserve this, or I love you, so this is yours, then what develops is, I mean, those are two different scenarios, but what develops is the child now believes that what I want is what I get. If I ask for what I want, what I expect is for you to give that to me. Or if you say, I'll give this to you because you are good, because I love you, then to them, they are developing, if somebody gives me something, then they are showing me love. So if you love me, that means you need to give me something for me to see that. And that's, like going all the way, 100%. But little by little, that develops in their mind. And I did not get everything handed to me. I did chores, I had to work for it somewhat. But in terms of um, how much I had to work for something, and what I got what I got for those as a reward, I think were a little bit skewed, and I mean, that isn't, I am grateful, like I'm grateful. That is a blessing, I shouldn't use blessing, but it was incredibly um nice of my parents. My parents did a really good job making sure that I was happy, that all of us kids were happy. And in return, unfortunately, humans are all flawed. Unfortunately, what I develop is expectations of life. If if a parent is to give their child what they want, or if you make your child, let's say, if you do your chores for the week, then I will give you um, whatever you want during the weekend. We will go wherever you want. You decide. Um, then yes, I still had to do work, but my expectations of what I get in return are skewed towards unrealistic. I would do chores for a week, do my laundry, do the dishes, sweep, mop, vacuum, whatever. And then as a reward, I would get to choose whatever I want. Shopping spree, go out for food, go get ice cream, maybe a mix. So usually I would be able to go get a toy, and then we would go out for dinner. And growing up, even later into my teen years, obviously, like you can't take your kid out to eat every single weekend, all three of your kids every single weekend. So it slowly becomes more and more responsibility for less and less reward. Um, but I was also the youngest child. So uh, I think that I got to watch my sisters have to take a lot of responsibility. My two older sisters take a lot of responsibility over the years, having to do more and more every week. And then at the end of the week, they would see less and less and less, or sometimes, like my oldest sister, she just started asking for less and less and less. And I do think um, that forming expectations is not only like it is not only something that somebody in their formative years can do. Forming expectations happens to anybody through pattern recognition. Like I think that's something I recognized was that my sister asked for less and less. And so my parents just kind of expected that from her and kind of became less willing to give her things when she asked for it. Um, uh, in regards of, reward for doing chores. So, um, those were expectations that were put on my older sisters, and I got to watch that happen. And um they started growing, a great sense of what it means to work for what you need, and the disappointment in asking for something and then slowly realizing that just asking for it, even if you do even if you do an insane amount of work over the week, that still doesn't mean that you've done enough to get the reward you're asking for, uh, which was incredibly well done by my parents. But I, being the youngest, I think that kind of got lost on me, or maybe they saw the distance that causes between a parent and a child, at least my parents and their daughters. When you're tough on your children, I mean, they're young, they're immature, so they take it personally. When I was, like when they were young, they did the same amount of work and then grew up uh, to slowly realize that they were no longer going to receive this same amount of reward. And that's crushing, like that's crushing. It's hard not to think my parents, like it is my parents who are changing. My parents don't love me as much, or my parents um, don't think as highly of me, or my parents aren't proud of me because I am no longer receiving the same attention that I was before, or I am now gaining more responsibility than I was as a child. It's hard for children to understand um, that kind of mentality uh, when you're trying to teach them very adult things. Discipline and responsibility is not something that children really need to worry about. So it's not something that comes into their lives until later on, or something that you try teaching until later on. But I think that seeing their children move out or become depressed or get into alcohol, drugs, things like that, it's hurtful. I can't imagine having children and then trying my best to make sure that they are uh, like the best version of themselves, to allow them to be the most successful in whatever they want to do. And I'll get into the um, right word, but the way that my parents raised me, like the way that I really can't think of the word, but anyways, I think it crushed my parents to watch that happen, to watch their children uh, gain a sense of kind of animosity towards them for trying their best. Because again, children, immaturity, and my sisters no longer feel that way because they've grown and learned that they've been able to look back on their past, because of the skills that they developed through the parenting that they received. Um, to know that it was necessary, that my parents were trying. From my perspective, it seems like my parents saw that and then looked at me and they said, I don't want that for at least our son. I want our son, because from then it's assumption, uh, or expectation. Again, it goes back to expectation, seeing patterns. You raise your oldest daughter, uh, your first daughter, in a certain way that you think is going to allow them to succeed, to be the best version of themselves. And then at the very end, like you're done, like the last things you need to teach is what it's like to be an adult. And so you try to teach as much responsibility, as much discipline, what it means to work for what you do. And um of course, if you try weaning them into that, um I'm not sure if weaning is the right word there, but if you try to slowly make that a thing, then you're gonna have to change the pattern they got used to, and that doesn't feel good, and it's hard not to take that personally when it's got to do, because it is personal. But um it's hard to depict that came from love and came from their best perspective. And so the parents watch this kid move out, and then slowly see that this kid no longer wants to talk to them. Um, that this their oldest now thinks that's their parents lost, their love for this child, or that their parents no longer care for them as much as they used to growing up, at least. And so they keep raising their second child the same way, but this time uh they take it a bit easier, maybe like they try to let the second child go in their own direction this time. Do what you want, make the friends you want. We won't we won't force you to not do something uh because we love you, because um apparently our first attempt, it seems like you will lose your love for us if we set some sort of boundary. Maybe that's the conclusion they come to, and this is all theoretically. But um, then that second child uh, still has to learn responsibility. So you still try to teach them what it means to live in the real world, but this time you don't set boundaries, because maybe it was the fact that we stopped you from making friends. Maybe it was the fact that we tried, uh, you know, like um, swaying you away from things that you really wanted to do, and maybe this will help you um, still still have love for us by the time you move out. But again, it happens. um your kid grows up, says, okay, well, clearly, something changed, my parents are treating me this way, in a certain way, that it's like you you say you're trying to help me, you say you thank me in the future, but right now, you know uh this shit sucks. I have to do chores, I have to work, and my allowance is going down, or maybe I don't get an allowance anymore. Now I just do chores for free. I go to school 8 hours a day, I come home, and you make me do chores, like more work. You make me read, make me do my homework, and now you're not giving me the reward that you used to growing up. So when I move out, it's relieving. It's relieving. Finally, I don't have to live under my parents' stupid rules, doing their stupid things and chores that they want me to do. Now I'm my own person, and for a while, that sense of relief, you probably want nothing to do with them. You want a change of pace, individuality. So you lose touch with your parents for a bit. Maybe you still stay in touch for a while, but you distance yourself. And your parents, after a period of time, start recognizing a pattern of you distancing yourself, and so they set expectations. I guess not, maybe not expectations, but they set sort of, I guess, expectation of, they make an assumption that, oh, we did something wrong here, uh to where now our children, our second child also doesn't want to reach out, our second child also doesn't like this. um so we did something wrong, something needs to change. So they look at their third child, who's still growing up, and they say, okay, this time we're not going to stop you from what you want, we're not going to set many boundaries. Obviously, we'll try to keep you informed, um but we're not going to set boundaries, and also we'll keep rewarding you. We're not gonna try this hard anymore to uh, teach you discipline, teach you responsibility, teach you how to live as a functional human being. Because maybe then you'll still have love, have respect, reach out to us when you move out, and still have a relationship with us in the future. And uh I think that in return, yes, I love my parents deeply. I have a lot of respect for them. uh and growing up, I had an amazing childhood, and I think that uh you know what I gained from that childhood was great. I know what kind of life I want to live. It's a life of freedom, and I think that also plays a role, is that all I really had to do growing up was try my best to have fun, to enjoy life, to find what I wanted to do, figure out what my passions are, and chase that. I didn't have to worry about financials. I didn't have to worry about um, responsibility. As long as my chores got done, then I'd get a weekly allowance, and then I'd be able to go hang out with friends. As long as I told my family what it was, as long as I communicated, then I had freedom. And my responsibilities really weren't that hard, because again, my parents, I guess, just didn't want to scare me or didn't want me to take it personally. So it was a complete lack of responsibilities, and kind of a lack of discipline as well. And I think that I am not alone when I say that disciplinary actions growing up, I was um, I was disciplined. You know, I think that spanking is it's weird. I think it's fine. I think it's a normal practice, and a way to get through to somebody who's young enough to be able to look past your parents as guidance. Um, when you don't take your parents seriously, um, it shows a sense of dominance. It feels weird to say, but on a primitive level, um, you know, quite literally displaying who is the alpha in this situation, the alpha in that wolf pack. Um, so I guess, displaying dominance, making sure that your child understands the level of respect that is supposed to be held. But there's limits. There's definitely specific ways to practice discipline towards your children that make sure that you're getting the correct point through, that make sure you are um disciplining in a way that actually allows your children to understand the place of which you're coming from, not just you did something that I asked you not to do, therefore I'm going to beat you now. It's not becoming more knowledgeable. It is trauma. You're connecting a traumatic experience with doing this action. And at least for me, it was easy to just not connect the two. I know my beliefs on what is right, what is wrong, and obviously stems heavily towards what my parents believe or what my parent believes. My dad's no longer around, so I don't really get to talk to him about what he believed growing up, or like his beliefs raising me. But I still get to talk to my mom, and she's a wonderful source of knowledge. But I also trust my mom as a genuine source of knowledge. She was a psychology major. I think she got a bachelor's degree in psychology and went through human resources. And um, I'm not going to go in depth into my mom's history, but I think that through that lack of intentional discipline, like trying to inform me, and like less trying to inform and more just how can I get this over with? How can we just tell you why we're disciplining you and then discipline you and then just move on, like just move on in life, so like, why would you do this? Well, because I thought it was fun. Well, that doesn't mean you can do it. Turn around, hit me with a spoon, spank me with a spoon, and then hug me and say, like, I'm sorry, I really didn't want to do that, but like, you really should not have done what you did. And then it's like, oh, I know, I'll never do it again. And then the next week I do it again because I forgot all about that interaction. because there was no thought put behind it. And I'm not saying that means they should have hit me more, obviously, but I'm saying that out of fear of me losing comfort or losing love and respect, they decided to go easier on me. Try to uh, make sure I was comfortable. And in that, I did not develop certain things. Like, I mean, I still developed them, but things just did not develop fully. Um, what did develop in a very strong way was curiosity and my my search for what I enjoy. You know, trying to find what I want for myself, and that kind of is, you know, like kind of leans towards selfishness, but I think I got lucky, and it kind of just helped me seek out um, what is what is it that I personally want, and that changes all the time. And I think that lack of self-control and discipline are one of the major things that makes that challenge very hard. ADHD is also a major contributor in how it was that like how I was programmed, and what it is that that I think I enjoy, what I choose to use to entertain myself. um, I think that trying to learn the science behind how your brain functions um, can be good for you, but to use that knowledge uh, in a way that is helpful is much more difficult than using that knowledge in a way to make excuses for yourself. So, you know, I would, you know, try to take that to heart. Um, Dopamine has a much higher impact on me. Like, I crave dopamine much more than the average human being. Um, and I've learned um, throughout my whole life how to gain that dopamine in any way. So growing up with a lack of discipline, like learning a lack of self discipline, I should say that self discipline and self control, I started learning, okay, then how do I gain dopamine? And um, what do I need to do to reach that point? And so I went towards things like food, thrill, you know, and then s- uh not so much in my early years, but later down the line, you know, like marijuana and video games I kind of grew up with, but didn't really have a problem with it. Um but quick releases of dopamine as fast as I can right here in the moment. I never really learned, first of all, that that was a bad thing in my formative years, that you should not just give in, you know. But I never got to learn more reasoning in my formative years, or at least in a way that stuck with me, why that was the case. Why do I go outside for an hour every hour I'm on the computer? Whenever those house rules slowly, you know, like I grew up, and you know, supposedly when you grow up, uh you're able to hold yourself accountable better. Um, so rules and restrictions slowly, you know, start being released, um, or lessened, so that way you can start to enjoy what you want to do more, because they trust that you'll be responsible now to make better decisions for yourself. I did not. I was not more responsible. I was not knowledgeable in why I was receiving the discipline I was. And so I was not able to give myself the same feedback, give myself the discipline that I received, because I didn't know why I should. And that leads to game addiction in general. Um, why I crave things so um in such great proportions, and why it's so difficult for me to notice. that what I'm doing is not good for me, or notice that what I'm doing has become an addiction, that is something that is kind of scary to me and to the people around me, because that lack of self awareness and that lack of, discipline alone has made it to where I'm very susceptible. I've gotten really into basically everything, besides like hard drugs, because of lack of wanting to. I surprisingly, the Dare program actually worked for me growing up, so I don't want to do hard drugs. But uh, things like marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, gambling, internet entertainment, online entertainment, screens, things like that. Um, Spending money in general, food, unhealthy habits, are things that I am very susceptible to um, gaining addiction for, unhealthy addiction, and it shows, and it did show throughout a lot of my life, uh, and apparently I was supposed to know. I mean, I had lots of talks with my mother about growing up, and why it felt like nobody really ever informed me on, like, hey, looks like you got a problem there. Like, maybe take a step out, like maybe take a step back and look at yourself. But it was because it wasn't really on people's minds. And people are busy with their own lives, and also by the time you get to a certain age, um, I guess for my parents specifically, after seeing what it was like for their first two kids to grow up, they kind of set expectations for me, what I was going to be like at a certain age. Even though they had changed certain things, they still already had expectations set on me for how I would be based off of the first two. So when I had a problem, when my sisters had a problem, at a certain age, they were able to take a step back and evaluate, self evaluate, and then kind of help themselves based off of what they see. So if they had a problem with gambling and they were like, "Oh, I'm fucking broke and I'm trying to like I need things to save for," then they would be able to take a step back and say like, "Oh, this is a problem. How do I stop? Okay, I'll slow down, or I'll just stop going to the casino or something like that. Delete the app on my phone." And they'll be able to recover through that. But and so my parents saw that and they said, okay, so by this age we should be able to expect that our son to be this way, or this developed, this mature, this responsible for themselves, for himself. And that did not happen. That did not happen. And I did not seek help because it's kind of a nasty circle, but I did not seek help because I didn't see I had a problem, and my parents didn't seek to help me because they thought I knew what I was doing, and to them, really the only way for a person to change who is fully developed and responsible for themselves is for they themselves to want to change, um, which is again something they learned through my sisters. You can't make somebody change, and if you do, then and they do not want to change, then you lose respect. Like, you lose their respect because you don't want what they want for themselves. So it was kind of just a vicious, like, circle of, this is what we think is going to happen with him based off of our first two children. Um, However, we're going to change certain things about how we raise him because we want him to, um, we want a different relationship. Like, we want a closer relationship with our children than we have, unfortunately, with our first two. And, um, mind you, we're all like only 3 years apart, or 4 or 5 years. So, both my first two sisters move out at 18, but you could kind of start getting the grasp of things long before people, like, your first two kids moved out. So, um, like, by the time both my sisters turned 15, I think, they were both in like a full emo era, getting into alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, all that kind of stuff. Sorry for calling you guys out, but like, they all did like the very stereotypical thing. I hate my parents, you know, they're trying to turn me into respectful human beings, like responsible adults, and I'm still a child. You know, obviously they're not that self-aware, but like it's just gaining uh unfortunately I think it would be like genuine hatred for your own parents because they're introducing you to the real world, and then you become an adult and your hatred moves. I mean, kind of off topic, but you know, your hatred, I think people move out of that like emo era because once you move out, you sort of learn. You say you go through life and you're like, oh, my bad. uh it's actually life that fucking sucks. But now y'all gotta help me with what's going on because this shit sucks. But um so you know, it comes back around. But both of my sisters did that same thing. Very emo phase in their life long before they moved out. I think that they set those expectations of what was going to come later in my life. And I mean, I did not have an emo phase because what was there to hate? What was there to hate from my parents? Um, and again, it feels sad using hate because I don't think that's true. I don't think it's hatred. I think it's just uh, lack of understanding and disconnectedness. You know, like you really aren't able to see where your parents are coming from because you haven't experienced what they have yet. Um, but you feel disconnected from them. You know, you don't feel like you're getting the same amount of love that you received growing up. So it kind of develops into a hatred, I guess. Um, so there's that. And then for me, it was I fucking love my life. My parents are great. I've got a PC, you know, like um I've got friends, you know, I'm able to eat whatever I want. I have an allowance so I can, you know, I can save up and buy a game, or maybe I can receive that allowance and then go to the store, the convenience store, and buy a bunch of fucking junk food immediately. Um, and um, and that was okay. That was okay because if that's what I wanted, um, then do the best you can at doing it. I guess the way my parents saw that was, we are doing a good job because our son is happy. Our son is happy. Our son loves us, has respect for us, um, and is not upset or disappointed, and is also, you know, still doing what he needs to do at this age, which is go to school. That's your only responsibility at that age, is go to school. They didn't even expect me to pass. They just wanted me to be there, um, which is crazy. I mean, that was the same with all of us kids. Uh, Success was not um, a requirement. It was not even an expectation. It was the only expectation was that you go where, like, you stay where we dropped you off at. You know, we're gonna drop you off at school now. Stay in school and at least try to go to your class. Like, go to your classes, um, and then we'll see you at the end of the day. You know, and we'll ask you how your day was. I was doing fine. They saw that I was doing fine. And so the problems I had, that I was already developing, addictions that I was already developing at such a young age, you know, maybe not nicotine or alcohol or drugs, but video games and eating and like bad uh like friends who were into the same thing, you know. It took me until, you know, like very recent years, maybe months ago, that to realize that people don't experience people don't experience certain things the way I do. You know, I turn on a computer and I'm immediately, you know, like rejuvenated, you know. And it's like it's like having a cigarette at the end of the day, you know. Like you immediately feel a bit relieved. And yes, that is addiction. I'm very aware, you know, like I'd at least like to say that I'm aware of problems that I have at this point. The way I experience things is very far off from a healthy way of experiencing things. Like it's even things I'm not addicted to, you know, trees, nature, going outside, exercise, things that might be good for me or things that are normal throughout my life. If it is normal, if it is not dopamine inducing, then it is meh. It is, it's all right. I'd rather not. It's all right. So that, I mean, obviously, that's a problem. Your whole family is getting ready to go on a hike, and they're like, "You want to come, Michael?" And you're just, "Fuck no, fuck no, I don't want to go on a hike." I mean, I'd be more respectful about it, but we good? My bad, my bad. But I was saying, like, uh things that were not dopamine inducing, or were not as dopamine inducing. I love hiking now. Like nowadays I love hiking, I love running, things like that, going outside, looking at trees, natures. I really like birds. But at the prime, at the peak, there was no interest in anything unless it was uh like video games, or like drugs. The most dopamine inducing activities that I could do at this moment right now, there was zero interest in it at all. So no social life, no sports, no activities, no going outside, no, I mean, even if I was on a computer, uh it was, um what can I do on this computer right now, not that I want to do, but that would give me the most dopamine, the most entertainment I can get right now. And so I'd throw on to like a YouTube video, and then I'd play a game with an idle Roblox game on the background. Like, as much things I can focus on at once. And then whenever the game I was playing was loading, I would scroll on my phone, scroll Instagram on my phone, just full dopamine maxing. Like, as much random shit I can get going on besides thinking about how boring life is. um Boredom, like, I really like the saying. I don't really like it, but I really relate to the saying, boredom is worse than death. It's a sad saying that is not true to the average, like, to the average Joe. Because that's just not true. If boredom is so undesirable to the point where um um you are incapable of being bored, like, to a physical degree, like you will dread boredom, then there is a major problem. Not It is no longer a small problem. There is something intensely wrong with your mind. And it's kind of a new thing, like, before like, video games became like so popularized, or honestly, even when video games were a thing, like, Nintendo was releasing consoles, like, uh the Wii, or I guess not even the Wii, but like the NES. you know Games weren't super exciting. It was cool because, like, back then it was cool because it's very new, for Mario to be released. But the thing they were comparing it to was real life. So it's like, whoa, like, this is crazy. Or like an arcade game, on a giant fucking thing. So it's like, this is fucking crazy. But now we live in an age where you're comparing it to the last AAA game that was released, like insane realistic graphics with a giant quest line and a story that is way more interesting than your fucking life, or sorry, my life, like, way cooler than going on what is a hike when I can go on a cross country road trip in this Lamborghini that is, like, got twin turbo and like nitrous on the back, and I'm fucking on a call with five of my buddies, and all of us are all, like, loving our time on this game. Like, why would I be on a hike? Um, and accessibility, like, you'd play on, you'd play Mario for so long, and then you're like, there's not much there, and then it's like, if I want a social life, I still have to leave my house. I still have to call somebody. Like, I have to stop playing the game to go socialize. Now you do anything you want, wherever you want, whenever you want. Um, and if you are tired of what you're doing, then you click off the game and you go do another one. Like, you try another game. And I'm not exactly saying that means that addiction comes naturally or is more common now. I can't say that with confidence. I don't know the truth. But what I will say is that it creates an environment unlike anything that we've seen before. You know, it creates a problem that we haven't really had to solve until modern day, which is addiction to computers. I mean, it's kind of specific, but like addiction to gaming um, is a very real thing, and it's incredibly hard to stop because it's not just um, the dopamine at that point. It is your social life. It gets to the point where it's the only thing that interests you. So withdrawals start to be a thing. Um, like, and it's not like, scratching at your skin or like a sickness like drugs would, but it's still trying to rewire your brain to find enjoyment in things outside of screens. And when screens is all you know, or what you believe is all you enjoy, then um, the feeling of not having screens or not being able to communicate with people anymore because your only social life was online, um, it's 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 hard. Out of all the addictions I've had, trying to get out of gaming it's unlike any kind of chemical um, withdrawal. It Trying to find enjoyment in life after really just uh, ruining my expectations um, of what enjoyment is, because you can't find this kind of entertainment anywhere else. Um, it I guess I'll try to tie it all together. So with that intense addiction growing, festering, and building up, um, along with not knowing how to function normally already in society, having it incredibly easy. So I don't know discipline, I don't know self control, I I don't know what a healthy lifestyle looks like already for myself. Um, in my own opinion. My beliefs is I know how my parents want me to live. I don't know um, how I should be living. I will say that after I turned 15, 16, I lost my dad. So shit kind of hit the fan there. And I'm not going to, you know, but uh, it kind of meant that now my mom was trying to juggle um, three kids, supporting three kids. One moved out, but still, like trying to get to that point. One of them, you know, severely depressed. Another one really struggling with life and also not really reaching out, not really communicating because, like the topic I was talking about before. And then another one who is zoned out completely, just lost. I'm speaking for me now, but like no interest in life, no friends, not trying hard in school, and I'm constantly on video games. And like and then trying to balance financial security, working full time, luckily from home, but like just responsibilities on top of each other, just stacked, piled, and they're all crushing you, like against you. And then your own personal life. And by the way, I'm speaking from my mom's perspective, like trying to balance all of these things. Um, you can't, like, physically and honestly, like, even subjectively, like, you shouldn't expect somebody to have to deal with all that and then still raise her children, um, in a manner that is best for all of them. I mean, like, there's just too much. There's too much. Sometimes life just fucking sucks, and that happens. There's nobody. Well, there's people to blame. Trying to balance all of these things, and then um, seeing these problems. Seeing these problems in your children. Um, Unfortunately, solving your children's problems just can't take priority. It just can't. You could try as hard as you can, when you have the time, but uh things had to change so drastically. And unfortunately for my family, um we now had to deal with all of these problems, um with kind of on our own. Like, we were all kind of lost. We didn't know what we needed to do to fix it. All new problems. And I think I should be coming to an end with this one for my own mental health in terms of editing. But it was kind of the nail in the coffin. I was at that peak of me being at my worst, and then I was still in school though. So it was peak addiction to games, but I was still going to school every day. And then all this stuff happened. Lost my dad, and everybody was like kind of in shambles trying to figure shit out. Um, I kind of remained stoic though, because I had already lost a disinterest. Like, I already was disinterested in life. It caused me to um, really lean into that lifestyle. And then we finally got a place of our own again, and then I quit school. I dropped out in the beginning of junior year to get a GED because I thought I was wasting my time. So I didn't get friends in person. I was already addicted to games and had already come up with my own system and was comfortable in life in terms of uh, my relationship with my mom and what it looks like for me to come home, hop on games, eat, go to bed, go to school, come home, hop on games. Like, it was, gaming is what I do. And so I dropped out with the idea that, well, now instead of going to school, I'm going to get a job early on and work full time. But then I handed in a few applications and said, this shit kind of blows. If these guys call me back, that'd be great. But I'm good. I'm going to go play games. And I did not get a call back. I was a basement dweller. I mean, like, obviously I'm not a basement dweller. Look at this beautiful room. Amazing room. Definitely, you see the window. I'm not in a basement. But like, there was not much difference between me and the stereotypical, uh like degenerate basement dweller. I got up to, I think, 370 pounds at my peak, and it was gaming all day, every day. Had no friends, was stealing to fuel this addiction, all of my addictions. And then my mom also smoked weed. She smoked weed for most of her life, or most of her adult life, and reluctantly over years of watching me smoke weed anyways, even though she didn't want me to, she decided, well, at least let me be the one you smoke with. So I smoke weed with my mom. Used to. I quit now. I like. I guess I finally gotten to the end of the story. I guess I'll say this objectively. In conclusion, my beliefs are that a person has their own individual way of conceiving the world, like thinking about the world. The way you think is unique to yourself. However, your upbringing and the way you are programmed in your formative years is what decides or shapes what it is that you think about. And well, I guess it shapes what your thoughts are naturally, and then what you decide to think about those thoughts.